This is the Chapter 1, Segment 3 outline, and the first topic that is discussed within this segment is how neuroscience is currently one of the fastest growing fields in science today. And this is mostly due to how the field is so interdisciplinary and how it accommodates and attracts a lot of different psychologists. So this would be biological or physiological cognitive psychologists that through neuroscience have a new way of testing or asking research questions. And psychology also benefits from lots of subfields such as developmental, social, personality, and clinical psychology. And the book alludes that these fields will be hinted on and explained how they all become the field itself. So psychology has had a long history of excluding women and minority groups, like most scientific fields in their history. So specifically looking at women in psychology, social attitudes towards women pursuing careers in the scientific field were mostly dismissive. And this was not just in psychology, but in pretty much every scientific field. And because of this, we will never quite know the contribution that women could have made to psychology in its beginnings, and perhaps how much further along the field would have been and would have benefited from women scientists. So, in its beginnings, women were often used as psychological subjects or participants, most famously in Sigmund Freud's studies concerning hysteria. He examined many women, and this was believed to be a mental disorder that was caused by a malfunctioning uterus. And because of this, in how males do not have a similar anatomy, this was reasoning as to why women were not suitable to be scientists. However, there are still many important women figures within the field of psychology, most famously Margaret Floy Washburn, who was an early leader in the study of animal behavior and was interested in the extent of consciousness in animals. And she also warned against projecting human emotions and reasoning onto their species. Then there's Mary Whiton Calkins, who was the first woman president of the APA, and Mary Covert Jones, who was the first to develop a technique for treating phobias, and this technique was known as desensitization. Concerning people of color in psychology, similarly to women, they were often dismissed, so the contribution to the field is something that we will never quite know the extent of what we could have missed out on. Regarding important people of color in psychology, there's Frances Sumner, who is the first African American to earn a doctorate in psychology. And then there's Kenneth Clark and Mamie Phipps Clark, who together developed the Clark-Doll test, in which children were showed two dolls that were identical, and one was black and one was white, and they were asked different questions about the dolls, and this was actually used as evidence for the negative effects of black children that were in segregated schools. And Kenneth Clark was also the first black president of the APA. Lastly, psychology has come a long way in its history, but there still seems to be several myths that endure in common culture, and even though these ideas may have been discredited by the field many years ago, the public still widely believes that they are established ideas. So most of these ideas have been portrayed in popular media and become tropes, and to the point where people think that they are well established. So just 3 examples of popular psychological myths that the book discusses is the reputation of Sigmund Freud. Now, Freud is often seen as a great pioneer who discovered the unconscious. However, he wasn't the first person to recognize the importance of the unconscious, but popularize notions about the subject in Western culture. Also, Freudian theory is not grounded in science, and majority of it is untestable, and majority of it was personal notions of Freud. Another myth is that we only use 10% of our brains, but actually we use almost all of the brain, and majority of it is active all the time. And interestingly enough, despite enormous strides in the field, nearly a third of psychology majors also believe this misguided idea. The last myth that I'll discuss is that hypnosis is a fundamentally different state of consciousness that can be used to help recover memories. So there's no real evidence that hypnosis is any more of a quote-unquote altered state of consciousness than perhaps when you are daydreaming and you go from daydreaming to reading a book. And while hypnosis can control pain, it fails to help memory recall when tested in the lab. And additionally, several cases of memories that are quote-unquote recovered under hypnosis, to which people are sent to prison, are later proven to be false.